It was almost as though there was a boogeyman out there.
We were facing a lot more enemy than we had the capability to deal with.
They dug trenches, they fortified houses. They were ready.
We wanted to go. We were just waiting on the edge of a knife. When are we going to get to go?
The order is seize the city.
RPGs, small arms fire from everywhere.
Come on. I told him that I wanted to go, and he looked at me and said, "Son, you're gonna die."
The destruction is just horrible.
The hardest thing about fighting this enemy is they're not afraid to die. If they're not afraid to die, then how do you fight them?
Ramps going down!
Be prepared to start at one end of the city and fight your way through to the other end.
There's firing going on. There are grenades being thrown in the house.
It became hand-to-hand fighting. It was so close.
Two selfless Marines run across this kill zone 4 times to pull Marines out of there.
I wasn't worried about, getting shot or getting wounded. I was worried about the guys to my left and right.
You always want to reassure these men that they've done their duty, because that memory is seared into their soul. They never forget it. None of us do.
Foreign policy, I don't make it. I just deliver the last 600 meters of it.
Welcome to Way Back When, Big Blend Radio's history podcast. So welcome, everyone. Today we are honored to have the award-winning filmmaker Michael Pack on the show. He's the founder of Manifold Productions. Go to manifoldproductions.com. And why we're so excited is that he has got his film. It's an acclaimed Iraq Award documentary called The Last 600 Meters. It comes out on PBS the eve of Veterans Day. And I really, really hope, Nancy and I, my mom and I, really hope you watch this. Living in 29 Palms, during this time frame of the Iraq War, we knew what it did just even in the community of the military families. And to see this, and I just watched it, so I'm really, as I told Michael, I'm watching my language. I go between tears and a lot of colorful language. It's impactful. I think what's the most important thing is that it's a documentary without a narrator. It is a documentary where the soldiers tell the story. So welcome, Michael. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be with you.
What led you to tell the story? Because this is the 2 deadliest battles, really, of the Iraq War. We're looking at Fallujah, Najaf. This was in 2004, everyone. These 2 were like the biggest, the deadliest, but I'm going to also say super dirty. But then my mom told me, aren't all battles dirty at some point? They were dirty.
Right.
They were mean. They were like, the other side going, oh, here's a white flag and pretending to playing dead, like animals do that kind of thing,
It was very dirty. They were horrible battles. They're the biggest battles America fought since Vietnam, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are really honored that it's going to be on right before Veterans Day. PBS is broadcasted. It'll be on nationally at 10 p.m. all over the country. And I really think that it's important to understand what happened there. They're the biggest battles. And as you know, so we tell the story from the vantage point of the soldiers and Marines that are fighting, from corporals up to 1-star generals, but people in the field. So it's called The Last 600 Meters because, as you know, a sniper in the film says, I don't make foreign policy. I deliver the last 600 meters of it, meaning what he can see through a sniper scope. And that's our focus, not the politics, but what these young men and women went through. And I think it's an important story to tell. The battles were in 2004, but we shot the interviews in 2006 and 2007. When really the memories were still fresh, the people were still young. I don't think you could capture it again like that today. I think it's a historic record. And as you said in the intro, There is no narration. They speak directly to camera. They tell you what happened. And they're very passionate and eloquent storytellers.
Yeah. The Band of Brothers part just got me. And we had done an interview with Mike Gordy, who's a historian and an author, about Richard Winters. We actually went to his park. He's got a memorial park in Pennsylvania. I was just like, oh, and this is beyond the movie, right? And I think, I was telling Nancy, my mom, and we lived in Africa for many years, and I was raised with AK-47s and limpet mines and understanding that kind of stuff. And I had friends in the military there and knew they went through that kind of stuff. And we were just talking about it, and she's like, yes, Vietnam. We were talking about Vietnam. She said, this is like Vietnam. And what the torture chambers, and you showed this in this film, all these things that I kind of grew up and knew about, but then like here it is in your face. And I think it's so perfect. It's going out for Veterans Day timeframe because there's a thank you for your service, which could be very flippant, but maybe people really understand what war is and really understand the soldier's story. That's why I bring up Richard Winters, because it's this brotherhood and sisterhood, right? There, you do have women in this too. Thank you. But it's how bad it is. I mean, this is really going against radicalism on all sides. And it's like, okay, now you're safe, but you're not,
It's horrible. Somebody, I think it might be Stanley Kubrick, said every war film is an anti-war film because the horrors of war are very real. I mean, we do not soft sell them. They're awful. We have a tanker officer talking about the smell of the Second Battle of Fallujah, never being able to forget.
He really didn't like the smells on any of it.
He didn't.
Or
Twice
in the
he
tank.
said that. Or in the tank. And, it can be horrible. But on the other hand, it's also heroic and courageous. And we show that too. I mean, it's really... But those battles were meat grinders, and it's important to portray them as what they were.
Was it to do this? And I think it was amazing that the soldiers spoke. Number one, I think they showed such, there was just such here's what you think and here's what it is. Like, here's what's happening in politics and in news versus what's here's on the ground. It's like all these things were just such opposites throughout this film. And for them to come and speak, I know it was so fresh, but at the same time, I think it's amazing they even did it. And I think they wanted to, in a way, to honor those who are lost, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, they had mixed feelings. I mean, if a challenge of the film was to win enough of their confidences so they would tell their story. You have to spend some time with them. They have to trust you. And I'm honored that they finally did. But they have difficulty talking about it. I mean, some of them, soldiers and Marines, it's mainly a Marine battle, but we have soldiers and one Air Force Special Forces woman involved. Yeah, I mean, they say now that it's been 17 years since I shot those interviews, and they say they want to show it to their wives and their children because it's easier to show the film than talk about it. And I think that's right. It's hard to talk about it. I think it's important that they do it. I think it did have a positive effect for them. I think they do. I think at a very deep level, they want their story told. And that's one of the important things that the film attempts to do. I mean, there is a lot of focus on PTSD, and you can see why after you see the film.
Yeah.
But they also want the story of the battles told, not just of the PTSD. So we want if these are the biggest battles, surely Americans could at least learn what happened there.
Well, so the battle thing is huge for me growing up in South Africa as a teen. Shaka Zulu changed war, how it happened with the British, right? And how he would circle around with his army, which he didn't let them wear their sandals. They had to go over burning fire. They ran through thorns. And it is, you're in the bush and you've got your Zulu chief here. If I'm going to do this, and this is what we're going to do, and we're going to surround them. And we're going in. And when I was watching this, I was like, holy cow, they're doing the Shaka Zulu. And I talk about this on a lot of military shows we do, so I'm sorry for those who've heard me. But I always felt like was one of those who really understood like the circular ambush. And that's what happened when you look at how these men went in, circled a city. Then next thing you know, you're fighting amongst in a cemetery that is hotter than hell. And then you're fighting in homes and houses, in a city, in a hospital, in hotel buildings. This is like insane. Like when my mom brought it up about being Vietnam at the same time, our soldiers didn't quite know what Vietnam was going to be like. It's the same thing here. And I know when we lived in 29 Palms, I had friends who actually went and were part of the training of what it's like to fight inside a house. And I didn't quite get it until the film.
Yeah, I have visited 29 Palms and seen some of the training, but the training is kind of antiseptic compared to the reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though they have people acting like it's
going in there going, la, la, la. Hell no. What's real is like, no, What they went through, these different terrains, how did you have filmmakers go out there? How did that balance work?
Well, the way we made this film is often when people make war documentaries, they shoot the interviews and they get generic war footage. So we did it the other way around. We looked for the footage first. So we looked for this sort of key footage that was dramatic and important from those battles, both shot by combat cameramen in the military and commercial photographers that were there in the battle. And then we looked for the people that were in the images so they could talk about the images. So that's why you feel that you're there, I think. And I have to say, we talked about this a little before, those cameramen are heroic. I mean, I conducted the interviews safely back here in Washington. They were risking their own lives. I mean, you saw the film, so you know that Second Battle of Fallujah culminates in that Hell House story, an amazing, horrible story where a group of Marines are trapped in one of the houses that they're clearing, and another group of Marines has to go through the kill zone 4 times just to rescue them, and many are wounded. But in order to have the images, this cameraman, Lucian Reed, was in there too, with his camera. Not even with a gun. And, his heroism is amazing. And I actually think the artistry of the shots, I mean, it's sort of amazing to me that there you are in a kill zone where your life is at risk and you're composing the shot. And the shots are beautifully composed. I mean, I'm in awe of the people who collected the footage that we used. So I'm happy to thank them for it. One of the things about having finished this film a long time ago is now we have to track down all the people that are in it, including Lucian Reed and others. And a lot of times we've lost touch with them. I hope they all finally see it.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, is like they're seeing it. Families are seeing it. Like I bring up my mom a lot because of Vietnam, and that was very close to her growing up. And so, just the visuals are disturbing. I want to warn people on that. And you should be disturbed. I think we should be, because we look at what's happening now in Gaza, Ukraine, and it's, I think what's so important is that we have to understand that what we may be always getting and we get desensitized. I bring this up on shows all the time. We're desensitized. We see numbers, we see talking heads, but this brings the reality of war. Like I know like Full Metal Jacket and all those movies do good jobs, but because it's told from the soldier's standpoint and the footage that you have backing it up it's real, period.
I think documentaries can do things that even feature films like Full Metal Jacket, even made by a genius like Stanley Kubrick, can't do. But he can do some things, but we can do others. I mean, you're watching actors when you watch Full Metal Jacket, whereas in our film, you're not. And that makes all the difference, really. These were real people in real situations, and the footage is about real things. And that's the power of a documentary. Ironically enough, as you know, as they leave the Second Battle of Fallujah, the very end of the film, they're all thinking of the end of Full Metal Jacket when they were leaving Hue City in Vietnam and singing, the Mickey Mouse song. And they sing it too. I mean, and they're walking through a surreal landscape, as they did in Hue City. I mean, it does take you back to Vietnam.
I think that those who have served actually really appreciate any kind of movie that it really does the right job, right? Like Full Metal Jacket. Yeah, it was good. Right. So you have these good movies, you've got good documentaries, and it's like honoring them so that they are understood. And so that's the other part I wanted to say about this is that civilians understand that really we understand the horrors of war. And yes, we'd all like to sing Kumbaya on the beach and not have war, but there are radicals out there. This is these are crazy people they were fighting against. This isn't like, okay, we're having a battle over territory. This is insane stuff that they went through. And there's no law at some point in this.
I think there always will be war. I mean, sadly enough. And there's evil in the world and organized evil. As you know, in the film, after they cleared Fallujah, they went into Fallujah the first time, and when they pulled out and they handed it over to insurgents, they used it as both a arms depot and a place where they tortured and beheaded people. And we have a little bit of a beheading. And the beheading, it's not like they just killed them. They beheaded them in a ritual manner. I hate to say this on the air, but we cut it way down, but it takes a long time to behead somebody with like a not such sharp sword. And then they, hold the head up in the air to display it, which is a very primitive symbol. And it's not. And this footage was posted on their website as a recruitment video to get people to join up, so they're not embarrassed by it. I mean, quite the contrary. So that kind of attitude towards human life, we will not eradicate it from the earth. There'll be people like that forever, and there'll be war forever. And we have to face what the consequences of it are. And, before we send young men and women into battle, we should really make sure we give them the support they need and the clear objectives and the means to achieve them.
Well, it seemed like they lost some of that during this war. And that was something also to think of at times, that supplies were gone. Communication was definitely off. I think about Louisiana. They have an area called No Man's Land, and it was Louisiana Purchase happens. And then there's all these different wars, Spain, France, all of this is going on. And Louisiana is no man's land. Everything had been sealed and done back in the day, right? We're talking the 1800s, back into everybody, the kings and queens, and everybody's doing their stuff. And this portion stayed unruled for 3 years. And Shenanigans, it's called Louisiana No Man's Land. It goes from kind of Lake Charles up to Shreveport. And Shenanigans, no rule. Privateers said, I'm going to store my rum here. I'm going to go take my boats that way, because it took so long for information to get to what was happening on the ground. And as I was watching the documentary, I'm like, wow, like things are happening here. It's kind of like the Cuban Missile Crisis had this issue at one point where, it's like, hey, it's like Kennedy's like, okay, it's fine. And I interviewed a gentleman who was actually on the submarine meeting the Cubans at this time of peace. And he goes out there. There's a BBC documentary, I think also went on PBS, and he went and said, what can we give you? What can we do? The Cubans went through hell on these submarines, and they were boiling in their submarines like the guys in the tanks in the Iraq War, right? They get there and they wanted coffee, bread, and cigarettes. He goes, oh, we can do that. They go to have this just amazing peace moment. Oh, we can give you this. And a airplane flies over, drops down flares so they could take a photo of this moment. And the Russians are just like, hell, holy hell, we're out. We're out. We're being fought at again.
Wow. They interpreted the flares as hostile.
Yes. Wow. It was like just an immediate thing. And then they were able to calm him down. And isn't that wild? Like
that is
those
wild.
Little moments. And that's what I think your film brought, those realities of the realities of war. And the more we see it, maybe we can understand when we say so many troops went in here, so many troops went in there,
Right. The numbers, you're right. The numbers really don't communicate much, and we're all numb to them. So that's right. Whereas the documentary could bring you up close to what it means. It doesn't, 10 people die doesn't sound like a big deal. You watch them die, it's a little bit different. So that's right. I hope we did bring that reality.
You did to me.
And I think it's just important to tell these stories, including the stories of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but these recent ones too. I think the veterans of the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, somewhat like the Vietnam veterans, have not been sufficiently honored because people don't like the war. They feel it didn't accomplish anything. They have all these negative feelings about the war, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we've asked these young men and women to put their lives on the line for us, and they did that, and they need to be honored for it. I mean, when we first finished a version of this film back in 2008, PBS declined to broadcast it. They felt it was too pro-military, and whatever. I have made 15 films that have all been on PBS. You can see them, as you said earlier, Lisa, at manifoldproductions.com. But this one they declined to broadcast, and we begged them to put it on every few years. And now the president of PBS, I think courageously, reversed those earlier decisions and decided to put it on. And I think maybe now we can look back at that war and not see it through the lens of politics and just understand what we asked of these young people to do and show compassion for it and try to understand what happened. So maybe the 17-year wait was good in a way. Maybe this is its moment. And as you said, we are around the world, there are similar kind of wars going on in Ukraine and in Gaza. And so maybe this is a particularly important time to understand that kind of urban warfare.
I also think it tells us that we never really know what's going on.
Well, that's true too. We never really do.
Now, how did you know you wanted to go in and film that, like make a documentary? Like, how did you know, like, this needs to happen and why for you?
Well, I began working on it in 2005, 2006. So the Iraq War was ongoing. I was originally going to do a film about technology and warfare. I mean, it was going to be a high-tech war. The initial invasion of Afghanistan was very high-tech, special forces going in there and getting air support and quickly taking down the Taliban. But in talking to the soldiers and Marines involved, I saw that these were the Fallujah and Najaf were the biggest battles, and although there was a lot of technology involved and a lot of very precision bombing going on for the time, a lot of it was just brutal combat of almost an ancient sort. I mean, you mentioned the Zulu warriors. There's a scene in that underground cemetery that you described in Najaf that's hot and deep underground and weirdly constructed. And one of the people there describes someone on his squad who's trapped in there with an insurgent, and they're in such close contact that neither can take out their rifle, and they both pull their bayonets, and they're in a knife fight to their death. In a very primitive situation. It could have been 100 years ago. I mean, it could have been, so I saw that, I heard those stories and I felt they weren't being told.
No, I don't think they have. And I think people shy away from actually telling the bloody story. And in this documentary, you put it all out there. I mean, that's why I said, like, trying to watch my language, because you're like, holy crap, this, like, really. And yes, a cat and a dog is going to eat a human being right there. You see the real realities of war, which is something I always want people to see, because maybe they'll pull back and see how far humans go a little crazy. And I understand from the side, it was like weird for the Marines, and the Army and the Marines are working together, the SEALs, the Green Berets, everyone's unified in this, right? But you see the Marines that one day they're like, hey, I'm handing candy out to a kid and helping a lady with water, and the next day I'm like killing the other side. They are going through so much change. It's like the only thing you can believe is what's happening right, the focus of now. How long can you keep that focus?
It's asking a lot of, and especially the ones that are sort of corporals and sergeants that are, in their late teens and early 20s. I mean, it's asking a lot of these young people to sort all that out. When to help somebody and when to shoot them is not even obvious. Or when they're a friend and when they're hiding an IED or a suicide vest. So it's a tremendous amount to ask of young people.
The biggest thing, too, that I took away is, like, when I bring up the radicalism and that kind of side, is the other side don't care. The suicide bombers don't care. And in Africa, we are used to suicide bombings. We're used to car bombings all the time. My mom, she went in downtown Port Elizabeth one day, and there's no one there. She went to her car going, why isn't there any cars parked around? There was a bomb attached to her car. Like, that's our growing up. So when you watch something like this from that background, you're like, someone's telling the truth. And I'm like, we're not nuts, But that's the thing. I think.
Did your mother figure out not to go into that car and turn it on?
Yes, she didn't. She did not. As soon as she saw it was weird, and you brought that up in the movie too, that eerie quiet. There's that eerie quiet. And if you're very attuned to nature and to that kind of sound, listen, like, people can't come up behind us pretty much at this point of our lives. And that is that. You don't, when something's off and you hear that vibe, September 11th was like that for us. It was quiet in the town. I'm like, what's going on? And this is America. We're now in America. Should be safe. And it wasn't. And I kept telling people this doesn't feel safe. And then this happens, I think it was a shock for this country.
It certainly was. It was a shock. And it was a fresh memory in the soldiers and Marines fighting, right? So the battles were 2004, not long after September 11th. So that was in their minds. Absolutely.
Well, you got to think the Gulf War as a whole, right? As a whole was this long, I don't think it's ever really over, honestly, but I wanted to ask you, when you first put this out, do you think some people just thought that war was unnecessary? Like as a whole, the Gulf War, the Iraq War, that there's this one side of like, this was unnecessary. And when you watch this, you want to take this and go like, you need to watch this. Did you feel that at all making this?
Well, I have my own opinions about the war, though I try not to put them in the film,
Okay.
and they're not in there.
Well, you're a realist. Yeah.
But I do feel like, and this is in the film, our goals kept changing, our rules of engagement kept changing. It wasn't clear what victory was, and it's problematic to be in a war where all that is confused. I think that's obvious now in retrospect. I do think radical Islam was a threat then and is a threat now. What we should do about it is another question. And I think that, for instance, Iran and their support of Hamas and Hezbollah and all these other militant terrorist groups destabilizing that region to this day. I mean, I hope that the current administration could bring peace to that area. But you are right, I think, Lisa. It's never a likely proposition that peace is going to come to the Middle East. We can all pray and hope for it, but it's a hard thing to achieve.
They switch roles. That's like, I'm handing it off to you now. I'm done with people. Now it's your turn. You know what I mean? It's weird. Like, yeah. Well, thank you for what you've done for the soldiers, those who go out there and truly risk their lives. And when we say those words and thank you for your service, watch this, you'll get the meaning behind it. Like, really feel it. And, understand what men and women go through in battle and in true sacrifice. I really believe, you understand that, because no matter what's going on in our world and politics and the news and how even we get our news, it becomes a battle of what you're in immediately for these people on the ground. So thank you. And in the air. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Everyone, again, PBS. It is on November 10th, so check out your local listings. And also, I'm going to put the link in the episode notes so that you can keep up with the film company. And it is all there, manifoldproductions.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. Great talking to you.
Thank you for joining us here on Big Blend Radio's Way Back When History Podcast. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.